Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is, what if it's perfect? What if we were talking yesterday about the pitfalls of perfectionism, but what if life is unfolding in its perfection? What would that look like? What would it look like in our experience and the way that we relate to life if we were to allow that perhaps it's all unfolding exactly as it's meant to, despite our trials and tribulations? So, yeah, uh, we'll get to having that conversation. But before we do, let's take a minute or two to get present. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to start today with you and with everybody else who's joining us. We're just going to take a couple minutes to get settled in, and then we'll have our conversation about what if it's actually perfect. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, and the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So what if it's perfect? You know, all our suffering, all our struggling, all our ups and downs and angst and bliss and joy and friction and aggression and hostility and anger and love and connection. What if it's all perfect? What would it require of us to imagine that indeed life were unfolding in its perfection, that perhaps we might have to entertain the possibility of a greater intelligence than our own, of a greater context than the context of our individual lives, that we would have to be imagining perhaps some larger order, some kind of intelligence that is directing an evolution that is way beyond the constraints of our individual lives. And I don't know about you, but when I entertain that possibility, there's some comfort in it for me. There's some perspective that provides, to be able to recognize that the span of our lifetimes is less than a blip on the radar of the universe. Actually, you know, the span of human existence actually is even less than a blip. And there are cycles of time and season and transition and transformation and evolution and change that are beyond our conception. And when we shift our perspectives, when we're looking at something from a narrow perspective, we have one impression of it. And as we stand back, then we can form a broader impression because we can be more aware of the factors that are influencing, that are at play, that are interweaving, that are all part of the greater function of whatever it is we're seeing. And when we stand back even further, we get an even broader perspective. We get an even more enriched view of the different factors at play. And perhaps we have the ability then to see different patterns and cycles and to recognize elements, the interplay of elements that we weren't even aware previously existed. And so this notion of allowing for the perfection of things, if we were to step back and recognize that, perhaps we would free ourselves a bit from the struggle and suffering that we encounter and that we nurture even in our resistance to the way things are. And so in talking about this notion of resistance, it's easy to consider that perhaps without the resistance, we'd feel a complacency. And I don't think that that's the case. I think when we are able to accept what is as it is, then we can then find a place from which to be responsive to interact with that circumstance. What we tend to do is we tend to resist and conceptualize and lay our conceptions over a circumstance and our resistance, and we act from that rather than from interacting with the what is actually present. So Rosalind says, what makes a flower perfect? Are we assigning judgment to what is beauty or imperfect? After the flower disintegrates and is recycled back into the earth, is it a flower still? I love this question, Rosalind. So our notion of perfect is 100% a judgment. You know, we were talking about how the notion of perfect is a construct. And what if we were to accept what is as perfection, that we are surrounded by perfection rather than our notion trying to impose our notion of perfection upon something? So that's an interesting thing. You know, are we perfect? Good morning, Jennifer. Welcome. So wonderful to have you joining us this morning for our conversation of what if it's perfect? What if life as it's unfolding is perfect, despite the ways that we might rail against it and suffer and struggle in the face of it? So to the second portion of your question, Rosalind, after the flower disintegrates and is recycled back into the earth, is it a flower still? And that brings up the question of what is life? So is a flower a thing or is it a process? Is a human being a thing or is it a process? Is our life a thing? Are we an identity, a thing, or are we a process? And I think that's the idea really that is at the foundation of this conversation around perfection, that there's this whole process of life unfolding in its perfection, that it is a process, a cycle, a movement. And we call ourselves people, or we call a flower as we are constraining one portion of this process. And it's just a moment, it may be an extended moment, but it's a moment in the process that we are naming by our names, that we are naming Rosalind, or we're naming Jennifer, or we're naming Mira. And that is a point. It may be an extended point, but it's a point in an unfolding process. And as we look at our lifetime, we're a child. And when do we stop being a child and become a young adult? And when do we stop becoming a young adult and become an adult? And when do we become an elder? The fact is that it's all a process, and its process is nested inside other processes. And that it's a constant unfolding. It's a constant expression of life or consciousness expressing itself in its own emergence. And as we think of that, if we think of, for instance, a flower as a process, what is it before it blooms? What is it before it even sprouts through the ground? What's emerging? What is it when it's a seed? What is it when that seed is forming? So Rosalind says something can appear still like the frames on a television. It's actually frames per second, but your eye isn't sensitive enough to detect the frozen frame. Exactly. Like what if, I remember reading autobiography of a yogi years ago, and by Yogananda, and he talked about how this experience of reality is a projection, like the frames of a film, and our consciousness strings those experiences, those moments together into some kind of continuum, some kind of continuity that creates the illusion of motion and the passage of time. Jennifer says, I still feel like a young adult. I can relate to that. I'm getting younger as I get older, thankfully. I was a very serious kid. So, starting to learn how to play and to generate new vitality. So when we talk about this frozen frame idea, we, even though we go from birth to death in our cycle, as we're considering that we are a thing, we are an identity, we have a name. This moment in time that we represent has a name by which we call ourselves. We can consider that is just a moment, that each of our lives is just a moment, and all these lives are happening all at the same time. All these moments are emerging as this greater picture, this greater function, process is occurring. What if it's all process? Truly, because when are you you? Are you when you're an infant? Is that the real you? Is the real you you on your deathbed? Is the real you you when you're having a temper tantrum? Is the real you you when you're blissfully in love, or when you're asleep, or when you're ill, or when when are you you? And is all of it you? And what is it that unifies all of that? What if we are in fact a process, and it's a process that's unfolding? And if each one of us, if humanity is a process, if all the different species on the planet, all the different life forms, all the different elements of the cosmos, what if it's all a process of transformation, of emergence and fading and cycling? And the thing is that when we look at life and our own lives from that perspective, it creates a very different container for our experience. And if the things that are unfolding in life are, and these are definitely assumptions, what if we're assuming, if we want to live from the space that it's unfolding in its perfection, that means that the circumstances that we are confronted with are perfect and giving us an opportunity to emerge as part of this process. They're serving the process. And that's, I mean, it's pretty clear that it's all process. I think it's easy to look at life and say it's all process. The emergence even of ideas, and then the supplanting of those ideas with new ideas and new technologies and new evolutions. We're very human-centric in our perspective on life and the world. But the truth is that we're just a very, very fractional element in the universe. Very fractional. I think it's so interesting. I imagine we've all caught wind of the conversation about extraterrestrials and all the information that has been withheld and kept secret and classified. And it's very interesting to imagine that human beings could possibly be the only intelligent life form in this grand universe. And it just speaks to how our view of life and the universe itself is so small. How could we possibly imagine, having some sense of the vastness of the universe, how could we possibly imagine that we're the only intelligent life form here? It begs any sense of rational thought. It's ridiculous. It's unimaginable. Rosalind, you know what? Rosalind says perhaps people are looking to aliens as being the savior. So I watched an interview from actually 9 years ago. I've been following this extraterrestrial thing for quite some time. And there was a wonderful hearing that was put together by Dr. Stephen Greer with former members of Congress and all kinds of high-ranking officials who had experienced extraterrestrial or, well, had interacted with extraterrestrial intelligence, not just unidentified or anomalous objects. And what are they calling them? UAPs, unidentified anomalous. I don't even remember what UAP stands for right now, but it used to be UFOs, unidentified flying objects. And one of the people said that the aliens said that we had made a pretty big mess of things here and that we needed help. I kind of hope for some kind of alien intervention, because currently we don't have the capacity, the capabilities, the resources, the intelligence, the technologies to be able to turn things around right now. And we're kind of at the precipice. So perhaps a wiser, older, and hopefully benevolent civilization, intelligence could come and help us turn things around. I think we need something. We need something. And anyway, this is all, if it's all part of this unfolding process, we're kind of at the edge of the cliff as a species, and we're pushing other species to the edge of the cliff quite clearly as well. And something's got to give, or we're in for a world of hurt. We're already starting to experience it, and the likelihood is that that's only going to accelerate. So if there's an intelligence that knows how to turn this stuff around and help us to wake up, that would be not necessarily such a bad thing. I guess that also begs the imagination, right? Maybe we had to get to this point to be willing to grow in certain ways. It's like it's been a grand experiment here, and looks like we've kind of messed it up pretty royally at this moment anyway. The whole alien idea really does bring in the X unknown, doesn't it? Because in some way we need to imagine that they're benevolent, or we would have been conquered by them a long time ago, right? Maybe, who knows? But I find it very interesting that this is becoming part of the public consciousness in this moment, because we are in a moment of emergency. There's no question about that. At least not in my mind. And for the most part, culturally, we've been pretty effective at ignoring the fact that we are at the edge of the cliff. And what if it's perfect? What if it's perfect? What if it's unfolding in its perfection, in its broader intelligence? And what if, even if there are aliens who are more intelligent and more advanced than us, what if they're also only a very small part of a much larger process? It's so fascinating to me to recognize the ego with which we, as humans, interact with life. We've created this Judeo-Christian origin story that says we are here to dominate the earth, essentially, that that the earth is ours to pillage, essentially, you know, like that its function is to serve us rather than that we are serving this greater sense of life unfolding. It's also fascinating, isn't it? I mean, we are living, I understand that I never heard the actual words, but I understand that there's a Chinese curse that says, may you live in interesting times. And we live in times that are nothing if they're not interesting, right? And it just gets more and more interesting. So what a time to be alive, to be in this process of unfolding and to be part of it and witness to it and witness to our own unfolding. It's quite the adventure. So let's learn to love life. Let's learn to listen to life and find a way to be more deeply connected to life itself and to one another, and to be flowing with the process rather than bucking against it, although that too has its perfection, perhaps. So what if it's perfect? Try on that lens and see what, if anything, shifts for you in your experience. That's the invitation. And who knows what we'll discover. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is The Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And as always, it is my privilege and pleasure to have the opportunity to have these conversations with you. And until next time, so much love.